is about front-of-pack nutrition labeling for promoting healthy food choices among adolescent consumers. Overweight and obesity in children and adolescents are serious and growing health concerns across the world. So globally, unhealthy diets are considered as one of the most important reasons for the increase in the prevalence of overweight and obesity. Given this background, the current e-dialogue attempts to examine the global scenario, the lessons learned, food label literacy, and nutrition literacy among adolescents. The purpose of front-of-pack nutrition labeling is to empower adolescent consumers to make healthier food choices by providing nutrition information in a very simple and a straightforward way. So there is a window of opportunity for policymakers to implement front-of-pack labeling coupled with intense nutrition education to help adolescents identify healthy foods and discourage the consumption of unhealthy processed foods. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hemalata ma'am, who is the Director of National Institute of Nutrition. Madam is a well-known figure across the country who hardly needs any introduction. Madam has an illustrious scientific career. Currently, she's also leading dietary guidelines for Indians. She's also spearheaded My Plate for the Day, which provides food-based guidelines for meeting micro and macronutrient requirements to prevent undernutrition and non-communicable diseases. Madam sits on many national and international level committees and advises regulatory leading bodies. I now request Dr. Hemalata ma'am to welcome the gathering and deliver opening remarks for the day.
Very good afternoon to all the delegates. Welcome to the third e-dialogue series, Front-of-Pack Nutrition Labeling for Promoting Healthy Food Choices among Adolescent Consumers. As you all know, it's a very important topic. There are roughly about 250 million adolescents in our country, and hence they make an important demographic dividend. It's a huge population, and any change in them will be reflected in the society and population across. Nevertheless, even the SDGs also underpin the health and well-being of adolescents. But what's happening in India among children and adolescents? The CNSS data showed abnormal biomarkers in 50% of the children and adolescents. That indicates that they are at risk of NCDs at adult age. And overweight obesity is also increasing, not only just in urban areas, even among a rural population. And in all possibility, these adverse changes have the potential to affect the future generation as well. Studies, including from NIN as well as globally, have shown that unhealthy diets of young men and women can impact not just their health, but change the epigenome of their future generation and make them prone for overweight and obesity. The packaged food products are typically energy dense, nutrient poor, and offer excessive amounts of energy from fats and also have higher sugar and sodium contents. Unhealthy food, all of you know very well, is the leading risk factor of NCDs. It is in the top list of all NCDs, including diabetes type 2, coronary heart disease, stroke, and many other factors that are within diet-related NCDs. And more than a third of the total diet-related environmental emissions are also due to the packaged foods, that is ultra-processed foods. So ultra-processed food will not only affect your health, but also the health of your future generation, that is your children, but also will contribute significantly to environmental pollution. Now, what is the consumption level of packaged food among our population? If we look at our data, calories from processed food in 2012 itself, it ranged from 5 to 15%. And now possibly it could be more than a fifth of total calories in a day, at least in a segment of a population, could be contributed by packaged food. The diet and biomarker study that we are going to roll out very soon will give the exact picture of what's happening among our population with respect to population packaged food that is growing in, rising, the level of manufacture is rising every year. But the findings on healthy food is also giving us hope that simple dietary changes can protect us from NCDs, that is diabetes type 2 particularly, and stroke and cardiovascular diseases, and also has a potential to change the fetal genome favorably. Also, for adolescents and young adults, it will be interesting to note that unhealthy foods can improve cognition and protect us from deleterious effects of environmental pollutants as well. There are studies to this effect. So if you want to be bright in your studies, if you want to be alert, have good memory, resort to healthy food. And another thing to be noted is, if you demand healthy food on your plate, the industry is bound to produce healthier versions. And the government also is obliged to improve biodiversity. We originally had a very great indigenous food system with beautiful biodiversity, which is slowly getting eroded or almost got eroded. Now the food system is focusing, our agriculture is mainly focused on sugars and staples. So I'm talking about the stakeholders, have huge responsibility to help the young minds in choosing healthy diets. Several communication methods are available to generate awareness among people to make healthy food choices. And front of pack labeling can be one of such approaches and a very promising tool to help consumers make informed and healthy food choices. Improving their awareness may facilitate in influencing the market to innovate and produce more healthy options. And I feel we need to come up with demand side innovations that has the potential to impact formulations of processed food to healthier versions. And also there are great lessons to be learned from other countries, especially Chile, Israel, Peru, Canada, and many other countries, including UK. Particularly the Chilean approach really worked very well, but it is critical to understand what would work for us, what works best for us, and also to deal with the huge illiteracy and industry pushes in India. We at NIN have just completed a study to assess the impact of Health Star and warning labels and nutrient scores, and we are in the process of evaluation. The results will be available very soon. So I once again welcome all the panelists and or Dr. S.K. Singh, Dr. Bhaskar, Dr. Lindsay, and the young representatives, the two youth leaders, and our little master, Dr. Madhavan Nair, our favorite, and all the other panelists, Dr. Amit Purana, and many others. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate our Dr. Subbarao and his team for this great work and organizing these important series, which address very, very important issues in food system, human health, and environmental health. Thank you, and all the very best.
Now, I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Subbarao sir to give an overview of Let's Fix Our Food initiatives and flag some issues on today's topic.
I would initially want to thank Dr. Hemlata, our director, for her very valuable address, and very crisply she has put forth all important points and the responsibility that we have, and a key message. Usually we have the habit of taking 5 key messages from every e-dialogue, which will go into our policy papers at a later point of time. And the first key message I already got: if the adolescents ask for healthy food, the industry is bound to make it. And food labeling can be an important nudge to make adolescents to ask for healthy food. And that's a very important key message that we've got. Thank you, madam, for that very good and very crisp, but very important address that you've given. And with the permission of all the panelists, I'll just take about 3 to 4 minutes to quickly give you a background of what is Let's Fix Our Food. And then probably, if time permits, another 2 minutes on some of the important aspects that we will deliberate on through this day. Can I share my slide, please? I'll just share the slide once. Is it visible?
Sir, can you just expand it?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So welcome you all. Thank you once again for accepting, and thanks to all the participants who registered from different nooks and corners of the country as well, and from different institutes, and a huge student community who's sitting in our assembly hall and then watching this. You have stellar lineup of speakers who will give you different perspectives, and you are free to ask your questions. And before I start my presentation, some quick administrative announcements. If you want to ask a question, please, all the participants can put it in the Q&A box or in the chat box. We will ask the questions at the end of each of the sessions, and the panelists can directly ask the questions since they have open access, but they have to raise their hand, and the moderator will decide and allow for these questions. To come to my presentation, this is about Let's Fix Our Food initiative. The initiative is basically, it comes with the background that ma'am has already given, this background that adolescent obesity is rising, and most importantly from the countries where they expected it wouldn't be, and the countries which always were shown as hubs of undernourished people, but we have problems coexisting of different kinds of malnutrition, and overweight and obesity being most important of them. And this has been a big network of various like-minded institutes and organizations and universities, academic organizations, as well as voluntary organizations. And during a meeting in June 2021 with Niti Aayog, various measures were looked at, and then 5 key things were actually finalized to be worked on, including the policy measures, so as to create an enabling food environment for the adolescents to make healthy food choices and discourage consumption of unhealthy foods. Some of them are regulating private and public media advertising and of HFSS foods, which we dealt with in the first 2 legs of the e-dialogue series, and also creating nutrition literacy that would be dealt with in a later one of the later e-dialogues, and front of pack labeling, taxation, and double duty actions. These are some of the things that will be discussed. And in all the conversations that we talk about, the adolescents and children actually miss. So this e-dialogue series and the consortium deliberately makes an attempt to bring to the table the adolescent point of view, and in every e-dialogue series we are actually taking into consideration the adolescents and bringing adolescents who are actively engaged in creating health awareness or health conscious adolescents into our fold to discuss and then bring forth their points of view. This Let's Fix Our Food, one of the important measures is to get the adolescent points of view on board. And at the same time, we also see engagement opportunities with policy and public measures, and also the departments that are concerned. And in that endeavor, there are several actions that are happening in the consortium with several partners. There are policy actions, there are adolescent engagement, there is capacity building. And in this endeavor, we have enabling partners, knowledge partners, implementing partners. We are one of the implementing partners who do the e-dialogue series, and we also collaborate with the other implementing partners and knowledge partners in terms of bringing out policy papers, review papers, and also research related to this. One of the research items is to have adolescents engaged and then collect their points of view in terms of what nudges them to select various foods. And that is being spearheaded by Public Health Foundation of India with inputs from National Institute of Nutrition. Here we are. And this is one thing that I always project about the adolescent food environment. Wherever you go, home, school, community, or digital media, adolescents are soft targets of any different kinds of nudges and different kinds of influences of foods. And there are various kinds of techniques that are used and appeals that are used to target the adolescents. Coming to nutrition labeling and labeling has been in Indian context, and it is evolving continuously in India. Some of our earlier studies have shown that prerequisites of using a food label is that people should be buying prepackaged foods, which there is no doubt there is a tremendous increase, as our director has already said, there is a tremendous and manifold increase of buying prepackaged foods. There should be basic education because the current contents on the label are more literacy driven. Only those who are educated can read the labels, but the front of pack labels can circumvent that limitation by only giving it in a symbol, which is easily understandable even to those who have limited education. Nutrition literacy is a very important factor. People need to know, or especially children need to know, what are good and what are bad nutrients for them, and then only then they'll be able to make choices. And user friendliness of the label, whichever we choose, are very important. I'll not go into details. Prepackaged foods, we already see in 2013 itself, we've seen how much adolescents buy. These are some of our supermarket intercept studies wherein we've seen this. And also, how many of them consider information of nutrition information on buying packaged foods? We all know most people see taste, brand name, and price and other things. But nutrition information, if you see, only about 20% of the people are interested to look at nutrition information. There are several reasons why they don't see, because his presentation style is too cluttered and there's a lot of information. And that information is in terms of calories, in terms of grams, in terms of ml and other things. People may not be in a position to decipher and make sense of how much they are actually consuming from the quantity they are consuming from the entire pack, because the pack size differs and it is on 100 grams. And these are also from our studies that we've seen. And lack of understanding of various nutrients as to what they do to your health. When that is not there, how much ever information you put, people may not be in a position to take it. And concerns about accuracy of information is also there, but I think we'll address that in the panel discussion. So some of our studies have shown that simple education of only 3 or 4 contact sessions for an 8th grader or 7th grader in a school can improve their nutrition, label reading and also food choices. I'm sorry for a very cluttered and small font size, but the key message that we are giving is after just 4-point contact, we've seen a significant improvement in terms of reading food labels, knowing the quality symbols, and also choosing and reading the ingredient list and many other things on the label. These are from our studies. The key take home that I am trying to give through this particular slide is that whatever be our front of pack nutrition labeling, it needs to be coupled with national level education or for adolescents to pick up and use that information. Thank you very much for your attention. These are just some of the things that I thought I should flag before we get into the presentations and discussion. And I will request Kiran Mai to introduce our next speaker. Thank you very much.
It's an honor and a privilege for us, sir, to have you with us today. So our next important speaker, the first speaker is Dr. S.K. Singh. Sir is a professor and head of International Institute of Population Sciences. Sir has done his PhD in Statistics and Demography at Banaras Hindu University in 1990 on some migration models and their applications. He even worked as a member of the National Working Group of HIV Estimation in India for 2017, worked as a consultant for UNAIDS Nepal for mapping and size estimation of MARPS in different regions of Nepal from April to May 2010. He even has a rich experience of completing 6 research projects with international collaborations like CDC, WHO, UNAIDS, UNDP, Macro International University of Connecticut, ICR, Hartford, etc. So I request Dr. S.K. Singh to give us some insights on how front-of-pack nutrition labeling helps Indian consumers identify and reduce unhealthy food purchases.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks very much. Good afternoon, Dr. Hemlata ji, Dr. Subba Rao Sahab, and Dr. Mahadevan Nair. We have been working very closely with Dr. Nair for one of our most important projects in the country. That's a National Family Health Survey project. Thanks for a comprehensive introduction, but I think my introduction should not be complete without mentioning that I have been associated with National Family Health Survey in this country right from 1998-99 onwards. That is why I have been associated with NFHS 2, 3, 4, 5, and currently engaged in implementation of NFHS 6, which we are about to start. In fact, I'm extremely thankful to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my views on healthy choice of food among adolescents who are backbone of the country. Our Honorable Prime Minister has always been advocating for empowering young people, especially young women, as a part of Mahila Sashaktikarana in this country, who are having potential to change the entire demographic and health situation of the country. I will be primarily focusing on three aspects during my presentation. I have opportunity to complete one project recently with our colleague from University of North Carolina, USA, Vital Strategy and Global Food Research Program. There we have primarily looked at identifying effective front of package levels in India. Of course, age limit was not adolescents. There we have primarily focused at adults population, but I am confident that learnings, process-related learnings of those that study will be extremely useful for our discussion which we are. I think Dr. Hemlata ji as well as Dr. Subbarao ji has already given and set a proper context for this discussion. We all are aware that with existing epidemiological transition in the country, lifestyle and diet-based densities are the key drivers of burden of disease in the country. We are having a definite shift in epidemiological transition, where moving from communicable to non-communicable disease. But if we are looking at the key drivers of those changes, we are getting overweight and obesity as one of the important drivers. In India, nearly 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 20 children are classified as overweight and obese. Rates are increasing faster in India than world average, and obesity prevalence is expected to more than triple by 2040. Our most recent estimates of National Family Health Survey shows that 21% of women and 24% of men aged 15 years and above are suffering with hypertension, and while 14% of women and 16% of men had diabetes in this country. If we are looking at the reasons for such a rapid increase in NCDs, among others, ease of access to energy-dense processed food is the key drivers of obesity and NCDs in the country. If we are looking at a simple statistics, during last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, basically we have gone 5 times increase in our consumption on packaged and processed foods. It is emerging culture of our country with increasing work participation of women, single family, nuclearization of family system in the country, even for school going children, rather than homemade tiffins, parents are giving them packaged and processed foods. That is why this cost is going up. Front of package levels, which our organizers has very rightly mentioned, is one of the possible solution of that, so that people can identify easily which packaged and processed foods has excess of nutrients of concern. That is why it becomes very essential for our country to know effectiveness of various front of package levels available globally, which may suit to Indian adults in their decision making about nutrients of concern. Whatever Hemlata ji has mentioned, that currently their organization has been taking some evaluation studies. We have recently completed a very scientific study with all technical rigors and all data quality measurements across 6 regions of the country, adopting randomized field experiments. And I am going to share with you the key findings of those. Before going to that, globally we are having 2 types of summary indicator system, where we are getting Nutri-Score and health star rating. Second is nutrient specific system, which again can be divided into 2 parts: non-interpretative levels, which is GTA, and interpretative levels, which is multiple traffic light and warning levels. But there is a very little information, very little valid, reliable, and sensitive information which can decide which one should be the best for adults in our country, which is highly heterogeneous in nature, both economy of the country, educational attainments of the country, culture, tradition, value system, along with the ecological differences across the country. That is why it becomes extremely important. Frankly speaking, if we are looking at the major FOPLs available globally, we are coming across this guidance simplicity to information complexity. All of us has experienced the implementation of COTPA Act in 2003 in our country for protecting people from tobacco, enhancing their. What we have seen that knowledge is the most powerful tool for behavior change, but we have evidence that simply giving knowledge is not always leading towards complete behavior change. The reason is that individual is required to pass through 5 different stages. Those stages are pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, preparation, and confirmation. That is why, while selecting this front of package level for our youth and adolescent in our country, we will have to look at both guidance simplicity as well as information complexity, so that those level can draw attention. It can provide also opportunity for comprehension and cognitive elaboration with a clarity of negative effect of risk perception, which may lead towards behavioral intention and behavioral response. We all are aware that if we are weak at any of these 5 points, always there is a chances of reversal in the behavioral change. And that is why it becomes much more critical. That is why our study has two tail objective. Primary outcome, where proportion of participants who were able to correctly identify that the product contain excess amount of nutrients of concerns and intention of product purchase. And second is the perceived message effectiveness, so that those who are less educated, living in remote rural areas, coming from lower socio-economic strata, can also easily identify. Our job becomes much easier when we are coming to adult population to adolescents, because our younger generation, adolescent and youth, are much advanced. They are much exposed to media, much exposed to social electronic media. For conducting this study, which was not related to only adolescents, it was for entire adults population, we have adopted a very systematic and scientific design, where for a national level study, sample size has been decided by 5 key parameters: expected baseline value, magnitude of change, confidence level by taking 95%, statistical power by taking 80% power, and also giving design effect. Considering all 5 parameters and taking design effect maximum 2, our sample size comes to be 500. And that is why, since we are going to take randomized field experiment, we have taken for 5 arms, and each arms we are giving 500 sample size. And since we are going for 6 heterogeneous geographical region in the country, that is why we have gone for around 420 from each region. And we have done very careful allocation of that sample by following a scientific design, fixing inclusion and exclusion criteria. Most important aspect of our randomized field experiment is the post-stratification. I am pretty sure all the participants of this study may be well aware that NFHS is not adopting post-stratification, but NSSO is starting post-stratification, because they are also taking allocation of sample in different regions by taking characteristics as a whole. We have taken for post-stratification, 50% should be primarily responsible or share responsibility for grocery shopping. 75% should be parents of children under age 16 years, quota of men and women, and also educational soft quota of 50%, less than 10 years of schooling, and 50% more than 10 years of schooling. by taking care of randomized field trial with the concept of post-stratification, we have selected 6 districts, one from each region of the country, and where we have taken 4 wards, 2 urban, 1 semi-urban, and 1 peri-urban, so that all kind of sample can be represented. Altogether, 24 sites we have selected, and from each site, we have taken 26 to 27 participants following time, location, cluster sampling approach, classifying peak days and peak time. That is why from each location we have gone for 96 about location, and each location we have gone from 24 to 26 to 27 participants in order to, and then we have gone for face-to-face interview after doing the mapping and listing of those sites and taking the footfalls of the people and adopting random interval. Now, all the 4 levels we have tested, which are traffic light level, warning levels, guided daily amounts, and health star rating. And 5th arm is the control group. Within around 2 months, we completed the survey. This is our sample profile, which has been very, very balanced profile. And our key results are this, that even in the control, where there is no level, around 39% people are able to identify the packaged and processed foods having excess of salt, sugar, and saturated fat. But this proportion has significantly gone up to 61%, where warning levels has been. And it has again improved in comparison to control group and gone up to significantly high 55%. Health star rating has gone 45%, and multiple traffic light has also gone 55%. Thus, on this percent of participants who correctly identified that products were high in nutrients of concern by study arms, definitely warning levels is the leading one, which has given maximum. Then mean purchase intentions, which has been measured by arms on 4-point scale. Here also, warning levels is emerging as a significant, but the difference is very marginal. Difference is not very profound. That is why. But if we are looking at perceived message effectiveness, which one is looking more effective? There, again, warning levels, all are significantly higher in comparison to control level, but warning levels is the leading one, which is perceived to be most effective for our viewers. We have also looked at certain other characteristics where one can get the mixed effect, but here also warning level is the coming as the most important rather than this complex GDA and this multiple traffic light. Health star rating is also coming good in certain indicator, but compared to control group, the warning level showed the largest impact of ability to identify products high in nutrients of concern. Warning levels were the only FOPL to reduce intention of purchase these products showed the largest impact on other secondary outcomes. Looking at another study which is completed almost at the similar time by our colleagues from Indian Institute of Management, IIM Ahmedabad, where primary outcome was intention to not purchase products high in nutrients of concern. That was our result. There also warning levels performed best on these outcomes. Other outcomes are not useful for informing for this debate what should go for our younger population, adolescents and youth in this country, because they are much advantageous position in comparison to entire adult population, like what we have consumed 18 to 60 years. Thus, results of both the studies indicate that warning levels discourage people most from buying products with high nutrients of concern across geographical regions in India. Health star rating definitely nudges consumers towards healthier purchases, while other FOPLs like warning levels discourage unhealthy purchases. Health star rating can be misinterpreted. The healthfulness of food products as focuses on ranking and hence unlikely to achieve healthy goals. There is no evidence that health star rating significantly impact the nutritional quality of what consumer purchase. Under this context, we are anticipating, I have 2 rounds of presentation to CEO or FSSAI also based on these findings. We understand that suitably developed programs and interventions around warning levels has a potential to address current epidemic of obesities and NCDs among adult population and children in India. And that is why it is going to be definitely very game changer in health related quality of life of the people of this country. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. If there are any quick questions, either from the panelists or from the participants, we can take 1 or 2 questions. If there's any panelists who want to ask, you may just raise your hand and then. Okay. Right. And I think we'll move to the next presentation if there are no questions. Dr. Bhaskar had just dropped in a message that he's not able to join right now. Probably we'll just wait for him. We'll move with the next speaker. He's stuck with the minister. So, yeah, Kiran Mai, yes, please. Thank you.
I'm honored to invite our next international speaker, Dr. Lindsay Smith-Talley. Madam is a nutrition epidemiologist and associate professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She has studied the design and impact of food policies in over 11 countries, with policies including taxation, front of package labeling, and removing unhealthy food marketing to children. She has over 110 publications, and her work has been featured in international organizations, including the New York Times, The Guardian, and others. Currently, she is working as an assistant professor, Department of Nutrition, Gilling School of Global Public Health, North Carolina. So we know that you're a terrific speaker, and all our attendees will gain much from your talk on front of pack labeling.
Hi, I'm so glad to be with everybody. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. So let's see how this goes. It's a little early here, so we'll see if my brain and my computer are all working this morning. All right, let's see. Are you seeing my slides?
Yes.
Great.
Can you put them in slideshow mode, please?
Yep. Now you're seeing the wrong screen probably. Let me do this. 1 sec. Okay, so are you now seeing the full slide?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'm super excited to be chatting with you all today about some of the work that we've been doing around the globe on front of package labeling. I am mostly going to be talking about our experience in Chile, which was the first country to pass a mandatory warning label policy, but I'll also talk a little bit about the status of food labeling around the globe and what we kind of know about what works so far. So this is how I usually think about food labeling systems, where we can really have a range of front of package labels from something that's very complex, like what you see here at the bottom with the guideline daily allowance, where we have lots of information, but it's very difficult for consumers to understand. And then moving towards more simple options. So we have the traffic light label, and then here a health star rating or kind of a Nutri-Score where there's more of a summary. And then of course, the most simple would be this kind of healthy choice logo, which denotes healthy, or a warning label, which denotes unhealthy. And so this is a map of what the world looks like right now in terms of countries that have implemented a front of package labeling system. As you can see, it's quite colorful. Now, there are a lot of countries that have implemented voluntary labeling schemes, which is what you see here in terms of most of these different colors. And those tend to, I guess I'll say that there's not a lot of evidence about those being very effective, because what tends to happen is that food companies will only put the labels on products that they think are already healthy. So for example, in Australia, where they have the Health Star rating, there has been evidence to show that those Health Star labels only show up on products that are already healthy, and so aren't very effective for consumers. So this is what it looks like when we consider both mandatory governmental regulations as well as voluntary, or companies can decide to put these labels on. This map shows you countries that have mandatory labels. And to date, warning labels are really the most popular option for a mandatory front of package labeling system. What you'll notice is that this is very heavily dominated by South America. Chile was the first country to implement a system of warning labels on packaged foods that are high in sugar, saturated fat, sodium, and calories. And then over the last 7 years, that's been followed by the majority of countries in South America, as well as Mexico, and most recently Chile, which just passed this regulation this month. So there's really been a lot of momentum in terms of implementing these labels. And the idea here is that, it's really getting at packaged ultra-processed foods that are high in these nutrients of concern. So the public health goal is to help consumers quickly and easily understand which products are unhealthy, and then also discourage them from choosing them. But what we know is that food products are very confusing because they contain a lot of marketing on the package, lots of health claims, nutrition claims. When we think about kids, we think about things like sports figures or celebrities or cartoons, all of these types of marketing elements that distract people and make it really hard to know what's healthy and what's not, and try to get people to buy unhealthy foods. So the idea behind these labels is that it kind of cuts through all of that and helps people really quickly see how these work. I will say from experience, I was just traveling with my family in Peru in June, and Peru has the same warning label system. And going to the grocery store with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, it's really difficult. Even as a nutritionist, I don't have time to pick up the products and look at the labels. And so I really relied on these warning labels on the front of packages to be able to see what was healthy really quickly without having to think about it while my kids were screaming and pulling stuff off the shelves. So the idea here is really about simplicity. And from a psychological, health behavior perspective, that's how we think about this too, where we're really thinking about these labels as having the ability to grab people's attention, give them knowledge, be very easy to comprehend, change their perceptions of the product, so help them understand that this product is less healthy, change their intentions to buy or consume a product, and then ultimately reduce intake. So that's kind of the conceptual model for how this works in food. These are much newer in food, though, and I will say that there's a long history from tobacco where they've been using labels like this for decades, with great effect in getting people to quit smoking and to remain quit. So we can look at the evidence kind of internationally and from tobacco as well when we're thinking about these labels. Okay, so moving into a specific example in Chile, where they were the first country to pass this type of policy. This is kind of what happened. Chile is a high-income country with high levels of obesity and really rapidly increasing intakes of ultra-processed foods high in these nutrients of concern that are linked with cardiovascular risk outcomes. So they implemented a series of policies, including front of package labels, These are in Spanish, but they say high in sugars, saturated fat, sodium, and calories. They also had a marketing policy, and this is really important to consider because I do think these policies work most effectively together. But their goal was really about childhood obesity prevention. And so to accomplish this, they used the front of package labels, but they also removed marketing to kids on all of these packages that had the labels. And then they also removed television advertisements of these products. So here you can see a sugary cereal box called Zucaritas. It's the Frosted Flakes. And this is what it looked like before the regulation. And then this is what it looked like after, where we have these, no more Tony the Tiger. And then we have these warning labels. And then the third policy that they implemented at the same time is they also banned the sale of these foods in schools. So kids' food environment was really changed because they had the warning labels on the packages, no more advertisements, and they couldn't buy these foods at the school canteens anymore. So here's a little bit more of what this actually looks like. These are 4 packages from Chile. And you can see that the prominence of the warning label depends in part on how many labels there are. So, if there's only 1 label versus some products would carry up to 4 labels, and that really starts to cover a lot of the package. So we conducted an evaluation with our colleagues at the University of Chile, great nutrition and obesity epidemiologists. And what we wanted to understand was what was the effect of this policy on the food supply and then the food environment, and then also on consumer behavior. And so the first thing we looked at was whether or not this regulation actually changed the nutritional quality of the food. And what we saw was that there was reformulation. The proportion of products that were high in energy, sugar, saturated fat, or sodium fell from 51% to 44%, just after the first phase of the regulation. So the Chilean regulation was implemented in 3 phases, with the first being the least stringent. And so we're just in the midst of evaluating the 3rd phase now, which had much more stringent nutrient thresholds. And we would expect to see this decrease even further. But even from this first phase, we saw this initial evidence of companies trying to cut the amounts of sugar and sodium in their products to try to avoid having the warning labels. There were also differences by product category. So the most frequent reductions occurred in beverages, dairy products, breakfast cereals, sweet goods, and savory spreads for sugar. And then for sodium, we saw changes in spreads, cheeses, ready-to-eat meals, sausages, and soups. And then for saturated fat, there were fewer changes, and we only saw decreases in the savory spreads category. And then for calories, we saw changes in these 2 categories, breakfast cereals and spreads. I think what's interesting to note, and this is maybe not the conversation for today, but is super important when we're thinking about front of package labeling, most of the changes occurred right around the threshold cutoff values. So companies only reformulate enough to get below that threshold. So if you set the threshold really high, it's not going to incentivize much change by the food industry. They will try to go just below it in order to be able to keep the product the same as much as possible while trying to avoid the warning labels. Okay, so that's a snapshot of what we saw with reformulation. What happened in terms of consumer purchases? So what we saw was that overall, this is just calories purchased, but we saw the same trends for sugar, sodium, saturated fat. Overall, we saw a small decline of 3.5% decrease in calories purchased. But what's super important to note is that the amount of calories people were buying from these unhealthy foods, the foods with warnings, that decreased by 24%. And so people compensated by buying more healthy foods. So, the overall calorie reduction was small, but there was this shifting from buying products with the label to buying products without the label, which is really exactly what you want to see. Okay, so I know today you all are talking about adolescents, and one of the things we wanted to understand was how did this policy affect children? So we have 2 ongoing cohort studies in Chile, one that involved preschoolers and their moms, and then one that involved adolescents. And we did this work very early on into the policy to try to understand, do people even get what these warning labels mean? The interesting thing in Chile is that there was not a ton of advocacy or public discourse prior to the implementation of their law. So it's not like folks were hearing about these warning labels for years and years. We weren't sure if they would understand what they meant. But what we found, and you can see from this graph, is that people really understood the warning labels. Both moms and adolescents understood that the labels meant that a food was not healthy, and they also understood that more labels meant that it was less healthy than one label. And there was also just very high public support for this policy. The vast majority of people felt like this is something that our Ministry of Health should be doing. They should be indicating which foods are healthy. So another thing I'll note just from a political perspective, because I think it's interesting and it's always relevant when we think about policy, this regulation in Chile was implemented during a government that was very progressive in terms of public health. At the time, Chile had a pediatrician as their president. And then, of course, administrations changed, and the next president was much less in favor of public health. And there was concern that this policy would be rolled back. But this policy was so popular and had such high levels of public support that it wasn't feasible for the government to change at that time. So this policy still exists and still enjoys a very high level of support in Chile. Okay, so again, trying to understand how people think about these labels and how they use them. So we did these focus groups in an economically diverse set of moms to try to understand how moms and kids were using their labels. And what we learned is that the kids were really important kind of vectors of information transmission for their parents. So the kids were coming home and telling their moms what they had learned in school about these labels, and then helping their moms initially kind of figure out what the labels meant in stores. So these quotes are, these logos, they help you a lot. Sometimes there are things you wouldn't even imagine they had that much sugar. One thing is knowing that it's sweet, and another is knowing how much sugar it is. So this is really talking about the effectiveness of these labels on products where it's confusing. So potentially things like yogurt or biscuits, where it may not be clear to people how much sugar there really is. And then this other quote, because of this new law, my daughter has been taught a lot about these Black logos. No, mom, you can't buy me that. My teacher won't accept it because it has those labels. And she requests salads. She won't accept snacks that have Black labels. So what I think is amazing here, and I experienced this myself when I was with my 5-year-old in Peru, little kids understand these labels. This is something that people in the population can really pick up on. They don't necessarily need to be able to read or understand nutritional concepts. It's not like the GDA, which has all of those numbers, and you have to think, oh, is 10% of sugar high or low? I don't know what that means. This is super simple. In this case, it looks like a stop sign. And so 5-year-olds can tell what this means. And that's really, really powerful. Of course, there are always concerns, a lot of pushback from the food industry about how these types of policies are going to affect the food sector and the economy at large. What we found was that there was absolutely no impact on employment or wages in Chile. The food industry remained stable over this period. We don't know, but our hypothesis is that workers simply switched from creating products that had the labels to creating products that didn't have the labels. And then there was also some kind of anecdotal evidence in the newspapers about how this policy incentivized or stimulated new businesses. So this article was about, a new business that was creating healthy snacks, so fruit pouches and fruit chips, to avoid these labels. So no evidence that this is harmful for the environment. Okay, so that is kind of the story of Chile. I think we're still understanding all of the effects there. We're about 5 years into our evaluation, and we're just about to understand what happened after their more stringent regulation that was implemented in 2019. As you can imagine, it's been a little challenging because In 2019, in the fall, Chile had a period of social unrest where grocery stores were closed. And then, of course, that was followed up by COVID. So it's been a little bit tricky. But we already have really strong evidence from the first phase of the regulation, and we anticipate that we will see even greater changes when we do evaluate the third and more stringent phase. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes shifting to a different part of the globe to talk a little bit more about adolescents, because most of the work on warning labels and front of package labels in general has been done in adults and not in kids. And adolescents in particular are a unique group. So we have just wrapped up a few studies doing some work on front of package labels in Indonesia that I'd just like to share with you very quickly. So the first thing we did was try to understand, how do teenagers make decisions about food, first of all? And secondly, how do they think about these different types of labels? So here we went in and we did focus groups and almost 50 teenagers in Jakarta. And we were looking again at a set of warning labels. We had a design company design these for use in Indonesia. That triangle shape was kind of indicative of danger. And this says warning, and then it talks about the nutrients. And then we had a traffic light label, and then this was a healthy seal that the Indonesian government is currently using on some products. And really what we found is that teenagers did not like the warning labels. They thought that they were, I think one of the words was spooky, or kind of too aggressive, like the warning labels are telling them what to do. And of course, they're teenagers. If we know anything about teenagers, they don't like to be told what to do. So they didn't like the warning labels. They liked the traffic light label, but the problem was they didn't understand the traffic light label. So even though the traffic light label uses this color coding that has red for, unhealthy, yellow for okay, and green for good or healthy, people didn't understand what that meant. And then there's also just conflicting information on this label. So even this one that you can see here, it's got all these numbers on it, and then it's got red and yellow. So it's hard for them to get it, but they liked that it was colorful. They liked that it had the information. So they did think they understood the warning labels better, and they felt like that would be more influential on their purchasing behavior. And so this was really interesting, because what we have seen in the past is that people's liking of a label is not necessarily very highly correlated with impact, because it's not on the pathway. Part of what we're trying to do is get people to shift away from certain products. So having them like it isn't necessarily the best outcome. However, I will say one thing that was really unique about the adolescents, they were familiar with the concept of warnings from tobacco. And in that population, there is a little bit of what we think of as reactance. So this idea that people might feel like you're taking away my freedom, now I'm going to rebel against you. So you told me not to smoke, and that makes me want to smoke even more. And so, of course, in this particular population, this is something that's really relevant to understand more of going forward. So those were kind of their initial reactions to the labels. We followed that up and we did an RCT to understand how these labels actually worked on food products. And what we saw was that both the traffic light labels and the warning labels helped adolescents identify unhealthy products. So relative to the control group, people who are in those conditions were better able to quickly point out that products were unhealthy. And they were also able to say, more specifically, this product is high in sugar. Only the warning labels had any influence on choice. So it was still quite small, where we had 62% of folks in the control condition who were purchasing unhealthy products versus 89 or 59% in the warning label group. But it was statistically significant. So it's a little bit more of confirmatory evidence of what we saw in the focus groups, where, both labels kind of provide information, but probably only the warnings are going to be effective in this population for shifting them to change what products they want to consume. So in conclusion, the data from Chile, which is really a robust evaluation, show that its warning label policy improved the food supply, changed consumer food purchases and food behaviors, as well as people's understanding and knowledge about food. And then from Indonesia, we have some preliminary data to suggest that warnings may be effective in this population. And that is all I have. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation and also accepting our nudge to join in a bit early, too early in the morning. Thank you very much. And then your presentation has some very key important takeaways, but I will request the panelists to raise any questions if they have for the presenter. And then we also look for Q&As if there.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah, my question to you is, what is the, the prevalence of obesity or overweight over time now after implementing your warning label? Yes, you have any data?
Not yet. We have not seen that data yet. I will say, I think the expectation is that we will see those changes first in the youngest kids. That's where we're seeing the biggest. I didn't show diet data yet because we're still working on it, but that's where we're seeing the biggest changes in actual dietary intake. So we'll have to see that. Those changes take a long time though.
Yeah, this is now how many years since you introduced this?
So it's been since 2016.
2016. Okay, it's almost 6 years.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
other question is, did you observe any perceptible change in sodium intake? Because you have shown only the calorie intake, right?
We did. The pattern in sodium was very similar to calories. Sugar and sodium both dropped substantially in purchases.
Then there should be some perceptible change again with your hypertension, because it's almost 6 years.
Yeah.
At least some impact should be available.
Yeah, I don't know if they have a national dietary survey planned. That would be the ideal data for looking at that question. But I'll follow up with my colleagues there. The hypertension question is obviously hard. Our cohorts are little kids, so it's something that we're not able to see. But certainly there must be some cohort studies in adults where we could look at that.
Also about the saturated fats intake, because that's another one very difficult to probably to demonstrate.
Saturated fats did decline. I think generally speaking, looking across all of the data we have, that decline was the smallest. The changes in sugar and sodium were the two bigger ones.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks.
Thank you. I just missed one point because there was a power outage here. I was interested to know about the reduction in total calories in the daily diet from the processed foods that you'd shown in Chile. That was an interesting. How was that measured? Like, did you have a baseline of what people were consuming, like a total diet kind of data that, and how much of it was directly attributable only to this law, or were there any other? This is just an academic.
Yeah, of course.
Interest.
Well, I love this question because we had really interesting data to be able to try to tease out the effect of the law from other secular changes. So what we have is an ongoing panel of households who participate and report their food purchases on a weekly basis for years. People in this sample were participating weekly for on average 3 years. So what we do is we look at the trend in those household purchases prior to implementation of the law, and then we predict out what that would have looked like if the law had not happened. And we compare what we saw after the law to what we thought would have happened based on pre-existing trends. And so what we saw was that there was this relative decrease of 24% compared to what we would have thought would have happened without the law. So it's kind of trying to create a hypothetical control group because the whole country experienced the policy at once.
Nice, that's interesting. One last question in the context of today's e-dialogue. Are there any studies ongoing, or are any studies being planned in all these countries where warning labels have been very successful, or other places, to your knowledge, with the adolescent consumers?
You know, the adolescents have really been neglected, I would say. The only study I know of is this one that we have, the one cohort that we have in Chile. Most of the other evaluations where they are collecting data on kids are looking at an earlier age range. And that's primarily because a lot of these policies also involve a marketing element, and the marketing element is usually targeted to younger kids. So they're, you know, if you can't evaluate everybody, you're trying to pick one. That's why they've chosen younger kids. But it's really a shame because, as I'm sure you all know, adolescents are increasingly independent, buying food away from home. They are developing those patterns and habits that will last the rest of their life. And so setting up, you know, healthy purchasing behaviors at that age is super important.
Can I have one more question?
Yes, sir. One last question, and then we'll move to the.
Yeah, this is regarding added sugar. Why you are focusing only on added sugar? Why not total sugar? And how do you compliance of sugar? I mean, you cannot differentiate between added sugar and total sugar, right?
So the results that we have in Chile are actually on total sugar because they don't require mandatory added sugar reporting in the country. Their label is about added sugar. So they had, you know, a 24% decline in total sugar purchases. The way that their warning label works is that they use the ingredients list and determine if there is the presence or absence of added sugar through the ingredients. And then they use a total sugar threshold to determine whether it's above or below. And if it's above, it gets the warning label. So that way it's easier to implement when you don't have an added sugar requirement. Now that has come up in other countries. And one of the things that has been proposed is simply say, if a product doesn't report added sugar, then you just assume it does have added sugar and you put the label on. That is a strong incentive to start reporting added sugar because you don't want to have the label. I haven't seen that happen yet, but it's mainly been total sugar that people have been looking at.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. And then I would appreciate if the adolescents on the panel have any questions or from the audience have any questions to the speaker. Claudia?
Sir?
Any questions?
Actually, no.
Thank you. Okay, Sriram, no. Then we'll move to the next session. And if Dr. Lindsay stays back with us till the meeting is over, we'll have more questions for her. Thank you very much for joining in once again. Yes, I request now my colleague Paramita to introduce our next panelist.
We will now initiate the panel discussion on today's topic, FOPNL for promoting healthy food choices among adolescent consumers. Our panelists will share their views on the required policy changes to make FOPNLs more user-friendly, particularly for children and adolescents. I would like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. K. Madhavan Nair. Sir is the chairperson and the scientific panel on labeling and claims at Sciences, as well as the fellow of the Telangana Academy of Sciences. He is a member of a large number of national and international expert committee on public health, nutrition, and including the revision of dietary guidelines for Indians' nutrient requirements and recommended dietary allowance for Indians, and developing the national standards for staple food fortification. Dr. Nair was formerly the head of micronutrient research group at ICMR and has worked here for more than 35 years. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Paramita. Sir, before you start, the panelists will all make a quick 5-minute remark first, and then questions will be asked by the moderator, followed by questions from the audience and from other panelists. Sir, you may go ahead with your remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Subbarao. And at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers and also the director for having this wonderful session, because I think we are trying to target at least the adolescents through some of the leaders who are present in this audience. I hope they will carry the message and give publicity to the message what ultimately we are going to derive from this e-dialogue. Now, I mean, the question is whether you like or not, we need to have certain regulation to restrict your intake of some of this, what we call it, unwanted nutrients beyond certain limits. Okay, so you should be really resisting intake of such nutrients beyond the limits. So our emphasis on this front of pack labeling is to give a summary of what is inside the prepackaged food. Okay, in simple terms, it is when you look at a logo, okay, a summary of what is inside by representing or giving a logo in the front of pack. See, for a prepackaged food, there are two sides, a front of pack and back of pack. Most of the information, what is present, about the product is given at the back of pack. And according to studies conducted by the moderator, Dr. Subbarao, I mean, very few people actually read the entire thing what is given. But for regulatory purpose, that information is really required to monitor. If anything happens, we should know what caused the problem in a population. So because these are all pre-packaged, and unless it's open, we won't know what is inside. So at the point of purchase, we won't know what is inside. So basically what is provided at the back of pack is what is inside, and there are all the mandatory things as per regulation, including there is actually a nutrition table given with all this information contained in the product. For example, if you take a chips packet, you normally find a nutrition information panel where energy is given. Okay, energy in terms of kilocalories, it may be 200, 300 kilocalories per serve. Okay, that means if you take one serve, you are actually consuming that much energy. Similarly, there are certain mandatory information given in the nutrition manual. One is energy, second one is protein, third one is fat. In that fat also there is what we call fat beyond certain limits is not required, that is saturated fat. And the fourth one is add sugar, total sugar. See, certain countries use added sugar, but in our country we provide both total sugar as well as added sugar. So both information is there at the back of pack. And also the most important nutrient, other one which we are trying to regulate in among the whole population through packaged food, this thing is sodium, that is the added salt. normally the product contain most of the products, especially those who are the children like chips and the fried items, they all contains many of these nutrients and beyond the limits. You know what happens when you take certain nutrients beyond the limits. They are the cause of that, then it becomes unhealthy. So our role as regulators, I am part of the regulator in the FSSA, Food Safety and Standard Authority of India, where we are trying to introduce a system so that you will come to know what is inside the package at the point of purchase, and you can take a decision. You compare the product across. If there are so many, you will be able to compare and take what is the best for you based on the information provided. So this is what we are trying to do as a front of pack panel. Somebody is talking in.
Dr. Nair, wouldn't it be useful
Yeah.
to include total fat rather than just saturated fat, and
We
total,
have both.
I mean, and added, not from the food, added total fat, and
We
then
have both
added
actually.
added sugar. What comes integrated with the food, within the food, we should not calculate.
We are actually giving all this information as back of pack. Total sugar, added sugar, total fat, saturated fat.
But it would, instead of confusing the people, we should limit ourselves only to total added sugar and total fat. That includes vegetable oil as well as saturated fat.
I'm just giving what is mandatory. We have to provide in the nutrition label as per FSSA. Okay, so when we are computing and making a system for you to identify without going through this table whether the product is good or healthy or unhealthy, you have certain logos put on the front of pack. Now you have seen 5 different types. One is warning label where each nutrient is shown as high or low. If it's high, it is put on the front of pack. Like for example, sodium is high, there will be a logo saying it is high. Sugar is high, there is a logo, added sugar. And the saturated fat, if it's high, there is a logo. Similarly, the other nutrients also. And in India, we are also going to adopt a certain system that will be, which has been tested among population and found to be suitable for our culture and our food habits and various other cultural aspects. So this needs to be implemented, and this the regulators are in the process of the dialogue has been completed in terms of what should be the type of logo or label which needs to be put on the front of pack, but it will be actually displayed, or it will be put on a website for everybody to comment. We hope that all of you will go through it and understand it and make the regulator understand your problems and give us more work to work on this. And we would like your response, because as a regulator, sometimes it's very difficult to understand your need and how you will react to certain things. So it's good that you react to our system and see whether you can adopt it. If you adopt, you will be we will follow it. And it is important that you need to carry this as a health warning, because most of you know the problem of our overweight and obesity is increasing, and we need to arrest or completely stop the increase in these non-communicable disease like hypertension, cardiovascular disease. Because at early stage, if you start preventing it, reducing the intake, you will have a healthy aging, healthy life. So better be prepared at this stage itself. And I would probably limit my presentation here, and would like to get more reactions from the participants. Thank you, Dr. Subbarao.
Yes, sir. One quick question. Do you think introduction of front of pack nutrition labeling prompts young consumers? I know you ask the young consumers to see what is going to come and what the other countries are doing, and then comment and then get back. There are some young health advocates here. Hope they will, because as part of Let's Fix Our Food program, many young health advocates from all over the country are being brought into 1 million survey on what nudges them to 1 million adolescents are going to participate in that particular survey being spearheaded by PHFI. But here some of them are there. But my question to you is, introducing FOPNL itself, will it prompt young consumers towards healthy eating choices? Or what according to you should be done while we are introducing any FOPNL, whatever it is, warning or star or Nutri-Score or whatever it is? What else needs to be done to prompt them to use?
Okay,
Quick
I think
response.
it's a very difficult question to answer, but our intention is it should prompt the youngsters to change their behavior in terms of purchasing behavior of these prepackaged foods. So the question is food labeling of prepackaged food. I mean, it's a dynamic process. I mean, it may we know that it keeps changing, but if there is a regulation in place now with respect to the nutrition information, but though it is introduced now only in July 2022, only it has become the compliance of that regulation has come into existence. So we are probably at an early stage of all this process of putting the label and comparing and educating our population with respect to its impact and its relevance to health. So there is lot need to be done to make this what I call the periodic sensitization on food literacy. Okay, that helps probably in terms of making it more impactful. Okay. And also it should provide information on overall. I mean, we are giving overall nutrition in terms of that nutrition table, but this is only in terms of certain nutrients which we know that they are harmful if we are taking beyond the limits. Now, what according to me the priority, there are, I think I put some couple of points. I will probably read it out for you. I think it should form part of curriculum. I think for me, I feel, because it has to come, because it's a lot to learn about. There's a science behind it. Okay. So it has to be part of a curriculum, especially food labeling part and FOPN in particular, and the concept and their implication, so that they make informed decision when purchasing food. Then, of course, the second point is, I mean, it's already in place, banning sale of prepackaged foods with a FOPNL that display unhealthy FOPNL, and make available prepackaged food which are healthy with healthy FOPNL in and around school premises. And the purpose of such ban also should be explained to the students, so that they relate why we don't get certain foods and why we are getting, and that so that they will retain that knowledge and then practice it. Okay. Then the other point I would like to suggest is, in general, they have certain products which they are favoring it. Probably we should collect those information and try to reduce the level of all these nutrients in that, and make this as a standard product. All those who are high in salt, sugar, and fat. Then last point is, of course, it's your area. Impart nutrition education and enable healthy food environment conducive for practicing healthy food habits. So what you need to propose is, I think, what we have as the my plate has to be part of the system itself, because that should be embedded in the whole thing, because then otherwise people don't understand why you need a healthy diet. So the my plate has to be part of education system, along with the FOPNL. That healthy. Yeah.
Dr. Nair, you're limiting yourself just to high salt, sugar, and fat. But apart from these concerns, we also have, especially in packaged foods, mass-produced foods. There are also other ingredients like coloring agents, flavoring agents, additives, and preservatives to increase the shelf life.
Madam,
If the same ingredients, if we prepare, or if small business people prepare, the products which will not last for more than 3 to 4 weeks, at the most it will be 4 weeks, not more than that. But whereas the packaged foods produced by mass-produced packaged foods by industries can last for 6 months or even 1 year. So definitely they'll be adding multiple preservatives also. So health concerns are there related to them as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have actually the back of pack labeling gives information on that, and there are certain restrictions of certain preservative. I mean, certain age groups should not be taking that. Warning also is given on the label.
And
like,
when
for
we
example,
speak of unorganized,
let me give certain examples are there. I mean, even including
Sir,
it is beyond
yeah,
the scope.
For time being, we'll just park this question to a later point of time. We will have other panelists also speak quickly, and then we'll come back to all these questions.
Thank you.
One important question that Madam has raised is about the other ingredients that are there, which are increase the shelf life and all. I think we need to discuss this point, and then we'll discuss about this with the other panelists also. Paramita, can we have the other panelists introduced, please? Next panelist.
Yes, sir. So now I would like to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Amit Khurana. He is the Program Director at the Center for Science and Environment. He leads the research and advocacy to push necessary changes in policy and practice related to marketing of junk foods. He will share his views and concerns about the proposed health star rating system by FSSAI. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Always a tough thing to actually talk on this, because I personally feel that the Indian scientific community knows this issue very well. We know what is wrong, what is not wrong. We know what is right, what should be done, but we talk. And we keep on talking, but I do feel it has been a delayed journey of, let's say, a decade-long journey. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was part of it. And whatever I say today is actually a reflection of that. Me being part of that, observing what has happened and what has not happened. In one line, I can say that it started in 2010 with a case in Delhi High Court. And then we were part of that FSSAI Constitute Committee in 2013. And ever since, we have just seen delays and dilutions. And in fact, today, what is proposed, let's say not formally, but otherwise, we all know HSR is being talked about based on a study, is actually the lowest point that I see in this entire journey. And I'm clearly not at all shying from saying that we know that the industry is powerful, but we know that the regulator needs to be much more stronger. And that has been the gap. That has been a major issue. We have talked about science. Everybody in this room, such an august gathering. We know science. We know what does sugar do. We know what added sugar is not measured. We know, Ma'am Hemlata just mentioned about importance of total sugar. Total fat. We have been talking about it, but we know how from 2018 draft to 2019, total fat became saturated fat. Sugar became added sugar, despite the fact that everybody knew that added sugar cannot be measured, analytically measured. So there has been a lot of all that politics, lobbying happening on all this. But what is very important to know is, and I have very limited time, that what we are talking today is essentially, you may call it junk food, you may call it HFSS food, you may call it ultra processed food. Industry was always never keen to have it called as junk food. Then they accepted HFSS food. The regulator accepted HFSS food. We all know HFSS food is just one part of the definition. It still does not tells you what good thing it does not have. It tells you what bad thing it has in excess. So it is a part definition. Ultra processed world is now more into discussion, and perhaps is a more complete definition. And the good that the discussion is now happening on those lines. But one has to also understand why this thing is happening, why this shift is happening. But ultimately, the central point is that this is bad food. This is unhealthy food because it is highly unbalanced, because it is actually nowhere near food. It is made in factories. It's a factory product, and it is the way it is marketed, the way it is produced. I mean, it's not. It doesn't have the chemicals that we have in our kitchens. So it clearly is not consumed the way we consume our regular foods. So if you keep that in mind, and then you see, okay, what is being proposed today for such a bad, or let's say for such unhealthy food, a label called health star rating. Health, then you have stars, and then you have rating. I mean, this is a completely opposite of what it should be. So that's where the major worry is. And we are talking about designs. Yes, there are elements of this designs which are a careful crafted strategy, if I may say so. I mean, you are talking about stars on the unhealthy food. You're talking about 5 stars there, irrespective of 2 stars being filled, but 3 stars still there lying, creating a perception. You are talking about a label which actually is not telling you about which nutrients are there in high quantity or low quantity. We do not really know, consumer would not really get to know what does a 2-star or a 3-star mean. What does a 2-star in one product mean with reference to 3-star in a particular product? And ultimately, we all would be trapped in this star game. We would not be moving away from this packaged food to a healthier, proper, normal food. And we are coming from a country which had a very, very rich tradition of traditional, proper, balanced food. So that's one major aspect. And then, of course, we are saying, and if you compare it to the warning label, which is nutrient specific, a diabetic in India, let's say he want to avoid sugar high products, he would not get to know whether these, even despite 4-star in a particular product, whether this is because of low sugar or this is because of something else. Same goes for a hypertensive. So there is a clear-cut importance of being nutrient specific, and these summary indicators actually completely, in fact, very deliberately designed to take to not tell the consumer what he is to be told. The other part is clearly the calculator. I mean, we are talking about positive ingredients here. In most of the warning labels, in most of the labels, actually, positive nutrient is not talked about. And this again, it's very carefully done. I mean, you're saying, we know that these foods do not have positive nutrients otherwise in a decent amount. So let's have a strategy to now promote these foods and say these have positive nutrients. That's how the advertising industry works. It's like we see the high fiber biscuits, or we see high fiber food because we know actually they lack fiber. So this is again a very organized construct of advertising and promoting food, and we all know this, but still we are not acting like that. And to add to this, what has been proposed is a 4 to 5 year of voluntary phase. So eventually, no real change on the ground. But what overall this means? This means, let's say if HSR comes, let's say it is going to mislead the consumer because it hides more than it tells. It can be very well manipulated by the industry because at the algorithm is at the back end. You have anyways introduced positive nutrients. We heard about millets being introduced. Nobody knows what is going to happen in terms of who is going to play with what numbers, and there's no way to verify those because you would never get to know what kind of ingredients are there otherwise. So it's going to be a very, 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 very tricky thing. Most importantly, now we are basically saying to glorify or giving a license of selling these bad foods as good foods. And that's a big worry. And I'm not really talking about, I mean, this is the issue that the world has seen. I mean, the world has also talked about these issues, that this is the problem when it comes to marketing of these such products. Now, the other part to this is we are trying to adopt a model which is just voluntary adopted in few countries, but not really, but actually rejected in many parts of the world. And of course, the worry is it will not help build long-term awareness. We will never get to know as a society that we should avoid high salt because salt has a problem. And there we had an opportunity this time, which would be lost otherwise, to do that thing right, to create a long-term awareness beyond packaged foods, beyond such snacking habits. We could have used this opportunity. And I hope that common sense prevails and we actually undo the thing that we want to do now and move to the right side of the things, which is the warning labels. But as I said, symbol-based warning, nutrient-specific warning labels, we all know have worked. They are proven effective. In some parts of the world, studies have done so. But yes, logically, intuitively, they appeal. They kind of create a. It fits the logic of the mind that yes, here is a nutrient label, perhaps not studied. Here is a warning label, perhaps not studied in many parts of the world, studied in just few countries. Still, it is symbol-based. We know that our population, on the other hand, does not only understands English. We know that many of us do not even know how to read. It will actually transcend the literacy and literature and nutrition literacy in particular, those barriers. So and language barriers, right? I mean, imagine an Israel label adopted in Israel, which just reflects butter with a knife, reflecting fat. That is much more powerful. Our scientific community knows this. And who else in FSSAI who has seen the success of that green dot in a green square logo for vegetarian? I mean, they are the ones who started it. They know the success of symbol-based logos. They've started a similar F+ logo for fortification. They've started a similar PIC logo for the Jaivik food. What stops them for using such symbol-based logo, which actually is also technically and logically correct? So one may say that this is also a symbol-based logo, Health Star. But intuitively, commonsensically, inherently, it is incorrect. It has fundamental flaws. At its first place, it should never have been part of those studies, because we all know it has positive nutrients and it will be used for claims and glorifying such products. I'll just take last 30 seconds, Dr. Subbarao. Lastly, what I think is industry will keep on doing what they want to do. It's a commercial interest. Nobody can stop them. We can't stop them from selling. What we can do is inform the consumer. And therefore, the job of the regulator is to make sure that in a simple and effective way, he or she is informed. And that is where a strong regulator has to come up. And that is where the scientific community has to raise their voice and get together and get it right. With that, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khurana. And probably I'll pose one question from the audience to you at this juncture and then quickly move to the next panelist. In countries like ours, where unorganized sector is a major market, what are the challenges you foresee for bringing out FOPNL, whether it is star or whether it is warning? I mean, there is inclination towards warning from some groups, and there is inclination by the regulator towards a star label. And then there are arguments on either side as to what they are. But in a country like ours, the question is about unorganized food producers, which is a major market. Where do you see the FOPNL being, and how can it be made more effective is the question.
Okay, so I may have some very, very provocative thoughts here, but I'll not stop from saying. This is a tendency to actually stop the right thing to happen. We have to be careful of that. We can always say India doesn't have lots of studies. We need our own studies. We don't have appropriate science. There's this street food market which is going on, and how would you do that? The industry typically comes up with the same logic. But please understand, there is still a significant portion of packaged food industry, and that industry is growing. That's one part of it. If we do it right, that will be benefiting. Number two, I believe, and I'm happy to debate on this, traditional food, street food can be made green. You can always use the right kind of oil. You can always add more vegetables to a street food product. It doesn't have those chemicals which otherwise mass-produced food has. It is relatively fresh. I am very clear that any day a samosa is better than a burger. And I'm very sure on that. This is what my understanding of things
agree with you completely.
Yeah. So we have to be careful that we don't fall into this trap of the industry. And we can talk about science. We can talk about studies. Please let's be open to the common sense and the logic. We come from a country which has rich food habits. I mean, come on. I mean, we know our food very well, and we know what kind of food the world gets to eat otherwise. We have to be very careful of this mother of fast food or mother of junk food industry and doing the same mistake again of first increasing this consumption and trying to do incremental change in 2-star, 3-star. Arey Baba, we can just move out of this and move to the good food. We know what is good food, right? Why are we trying to formulate with just 0.1 gram of let's say sugar or fat and say this is more stars? Is this the answer? Do we all not know what is going to happen in future? Do we all do not want to raise our kids in a scenario which is more ecologically, which is more health-wise, much more sustainable? So that's what my worry is. And you can see the frustration in my voice. And that is because of the 12 years of journey I see. And I really am it is disheartening, but I still am happy that NIN is here today. I think NIN should have taken lead on this much earlier. We were waiting for you. And I'm so happy, Dr. Hemlata, you today raised some very good points. And I would like to really encourage you and support you. I mean, who else knows nutrition in this country better than NIN? And we still are doing studies through a management institute who has no clue about nutrition. I mean, what is this happening? So this is where my worry is, and I'm sorry if I have raised some very provocative questions, but I personally very strongly believe about these.
Thank you, Dr. Khurana. Our endeavor is to bring all points of view onto the table, and I think we are doing that today. Can we move to the next panelist now, Paramita?
Yes, sir. We now welcome Dr. Rupa Shivashankar. She is a scientist at the Indian Council of Medical Research. She has an MD in Community Medicine from AIIMS, New Delhi, and a master's in epidemiology from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She is a senior scientist at the NCD division of ICMR and oversees research in the area, particularly in cardiovascular diseases. She has an experience of over 15 years on NCD research and developing an implementation of public health interventions to prevent and control NCDs. She has over 70 research publications in various peer-reviewed journals. And before ICMR, she has been associated with organizations like Resolve to Save Lives and PHSI.
Thank you, Paramita. Good evening, and I thank the organizers, specifically Dr. Hemlata and Dr. Subba Rao, for inviting me to this panel. And so great to see my previous colleagues here on the panel as well, Dr. Bhavna, Dr. S.K. Singh, Dr. Lindsay, Mr. Sanjay, many of them, and good to be part of the discussion where they are all involved. And it's my pleasure to start after such a passionate talk by Mr. Amit Khurana, and I totally agree with every word he has said on this panel. What I like to do in the beginning is to just get a bird eye view of where does this FOPL stand in the major issues related to non-communicable diseases in this country, right? I think I don't have to specifically see how big a problem of NCDs to the group here. We know that 60 to 75%, depending on various different estimation, the deaths are due to NCDs in this country. And not just the overall death, the 60% of the premature mortality is due to NCDs. And I could go on saying how many DALIs and disabilities are caused due to NCDs. And I don't want to bore you all with all the numbers, but two important things I want to say, specifically when we are talking about adolescents in this panel, is the number I'm going to talk about is 12% of myocardial infarctions that's happening in this country is happening in the adults, young adults, less than 40 years of age. And we'll have to start thinking where these risk factors have beginning for these 12% of people with MI. And second, the young adult diabetes is increasing. While it used to be predominantly type 1 in the earlier days, the type 2 diabetes, which is due to the metabolic diseases like obesity, has been increasing in young adults who are less than 35 years. Okay, So when we talk about this overall pictures of NCD, the World Health Organization and all of us agree on the 5 major risk factors, right? The tobacco, alcohol, low physical activity, unhealthy diet, and air pollution are the 5 major risk factors when we talk about it. Dr. S.K. Singh is here, and I know Sir has led all the NFHS data. And what does that say? For example, I was just looking at the analysis, and I want to quote that from NFHS 3 to 4, there's been at least 12% reduction in tobacco consumption among men from 57% to 45%, and 2 to 3% reduction in alcohol consumption among men from 31 to 29%. But when we look at the obesity, which is the metabolic part of the non-communicable diseases, there's a humongous increase specifically among women from 12 to 20%, and which has increased much higher in NFHS 5 and 9.3 to 11% among men. So, and this is when I'm talking about adult 15 to 49 years of age. But when we come to children and adolescent, many surveys have shown this is 4% obesity among children who are 5 to 9 years of age, and 5% of adolescents are having obesity. And a recent estimation, which has done a systematic review of all the research papers in India from 2010 onwards, has found 19% of the children and adolescent are either overweight or obese. That is 1 in 5 children, which is a very, very shocking estimate, right? So what I wanted to say, coming back to the WHO thing, the 5 important risk factors: tobacco, alcohol, air pollution. We do know tobacco and alcohol are reducing. Air pollution is increasing. It's beyond the individual capacity. While we know the obesity, which is actually the result of the low physical activity and unhealthy diet, is increasing. We don't have an extremely good data on, like, to talk about what's the level of physical activity and unhealthy diet in our country. But without any doubt, I can say reduction in the physical activity in the children, adolescent and adolescents in all age groups. But the issue is, now, with respect to tobacco, alcohol, and air pollution, we all know it's straightforward, that needs to reduce. Physical activity, it's pretty straightforward, that needs to increase. But when it comes to unhealthy diet, that's where most of us fail in understanding what is the problem because of its complexity. Forget the common people, even experts agree and disagree on what all needs to be there in what is healthy, what is unhealthy. Even just now we had a discussion whether it should be total fat or saturated fat. It's pretty confusing, right? But despite all that, if I come to there's a good sense of what is good in a healthy diet: whole grain, fruits and vegetables, foods rich in proteins like milk and milk products, dal, lean meat, egg, and a good fat like mufa, rich in mufa and tofa. We all agree on that. And where do these come from? They don't come from our packaged food. I think most of us can agree on that. They come from our regular meal, our traditional meal, what we have at home. It's fruits and vegetables. It's fresh food, or the whole grains. That's your roti, rice, and dal, what you're eating at home. Maybe the milk and milk products, some of them, they come in the packaged food, which is used. Other than that, most of this consumed are not coming in the packaged food. But when I come to what is unhealthy part of the diet, that is high in sugar, high in salt, high in saturated fat. I would like to call that saturated fat because fat can also be good. This is where our significant, your high sugar, high fat, and high sodium diet are not coming from your traditional meals. HFSS food are coming from the packaged food. That is why the labeling needs to address this issue rather than worry about the health part of the packaged food, like what Mr. Amit Kumar Khurana was talking about just prior to my talk. I make a stop here. I know we need to continue the panel. We are having time, and I'll come back to the FOPL issues, Dr. Subbarao, when we come next. Yeah.
Thank you for those remarks. If there are any quick questions, we'll take from. Yeah, I mean, Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Singh have answered some of the questions, but one of the questions is, good evening, everyone. So many questions. So my question is, since there is so much of diversity in health communication and understanding in the context of FOPNL, who is better? Which one is better to focus on? Is it a summary label or a nutrient-specific label or warning label? I think that's the debate all about. I think if you can quickly give your view on that, Dr. Rupa.
Summary label. Again, the summary label, when we are talking about health star rating or other summary labels, that's where my issue I just spoke about is like we're talking about the good parts of that's not like it in a packet of potato chips in a children is consuming. We're not expecting them to get a good nutrient, but to understand that it has high in bad nutrients. Okay, so I would suggest, and I think there is sufficient evidences which is presented by the speakers during the panel as well, that we should focus on the nutrient specific labeling and preferably symbol based warning labels.
Right. Do the adolescents have any questions? Okay, then we'll move to our next panelist, please.
I now welcome Dr. Bhavna Sharma. She's the consultant and country lead of the Resolve to Save Life organization. She's a trained pharmacologist with extensive experience of more than 24 years in various fields of clinical research in non-communicable diseases and drug development. She has worked for establishing and implementing strategies in collaboration with Government of India as well as private companies. She works with the Resolve to Save Life organization, which is basically an organization that works towards reducing non-communicable disease burden through approaches like reduction of salt consumption, trans fat consumption. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. We are an organization which is looking at how we can reduce blood pressure through just reduction of sodium in your diet. So actually we're looking at nutrition from a perspective of limiting your diseases. And if you look at India and we look at FOPL from Indian perspective, all the speakers have covered most of the areas, and we need to look at what do we want to achieve with FOPL in India. What is our target? The target is that we look at what is it we are consuming, identify the unhealthy products, and discourage our population from consuming it. That is the purpose of FOPL, if we think of it from a layman's perspective. And we have a population, as rightly pointed out by our previous speakers, we have a large range of socioeconomic status people. We have literate, illiterate, various various population type. So which will be the label which will be most effective? Easy to understand, sign-based, as we have been using it, like traffic lights and traffic signals are basically just symbols, and anybody who is driving can understand it. So we should learn from the practices we have been actually adopting in our regulations systematically over the period of time. If you will look at that, you will see that symbols are the easiest way, and warning that we warn by a red light, red cross when we are looking at traffic lights. So we should think of that. That is how we should look at FOPL, because we want to basically make our population aware, because what is happening is, as rightly Rupa had said, that our disease burden of non-communicable diseases is increasing rapidly, and younger population is being affected by it extensively. So we definitely, this is a very good initiative by NIN and Dr. Snelata for looking at food from that perspective and looking at FOPL. And what other things do we look at? If you look at the change in our diet patterns, if you think of how the Indian population dietary intake has changed, we did not have so much pre-packaged ultra-processed food and drinks available freely in India prior to the advent of various companies. So we were actually not so consuming all these processed food, which we are now doing it very systematically. But we cannot change the what is happening. But what we can look at it from a regulation perspective is have a FOPL design using a strong. We should look at what Nutri-Score are we going to do, a nutrient profiling we are going to look at, because that is going to determine our FOPL. So we have to look at two factors when you are looking at FOPL. One is the designing, and one is at the nutrient profiling model we are going to use, because that, as our previous speaker had said, that companies will actually just lower their standards by just 0.1% and get the best label. So I think we need to look at that. And one of the things which I have learned, because I have worked on various labeling for pharmaceuticals, labels at the back of the package are not seen by people. They are so complicated that even an educated person cannot read. So we should think of FOPL and think of very simple messaging like we are using for other areas. So that is the crux of the matter, that we should look at our population, look at what we want to convey, and reduce the unhealthy habits from our people. So that means we want to discourage our population to pick up the unhealthy food, not look at the healthy aspect of it at all. So that would be my take on this. And if we can reduce these, if we even reduce by salt by just 30% in our diet, we'll reduce hypertension systematically. Similarly, if we reduce sugars in our diet, we would reduce the diabetic epidemic, which is really, I mean, it's really spreading so widely in our population. I think this is a really good initiative. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I think since we are running out of time and we need to give platform to our young participants in this panel, we'll quickly give more time. And I see Dr. Lindsay has been patiently typing and Dr. S.K. Singh have been answering queries in a Q&A box. We'll take them at the end of the session once, and then we'll quickly ask our young participants in this to give us an overview of what prompts their food choices and how, as health advocates, they would take forward any initiative related to engaging with more of their peers to push them towards choosing healthy. And we have two more important questions that Dr. Hemlata had raised and also Dr. Nair had raised. We'll get back to them after these two people give their points of view. Yes, Paramita, can you introduce Gloria?
Yes, we are very happy to have two adolescent youth leaders in this panel discussion. Since this whole endeavor is about them, we would like to provide them equal table and platform for them to share their views on how to make FOPNLs more useful for them. So the first youth leader is Ms. Claudia Sun. She is an adolescent youth leader from Meghalaya, and she's a believer and advocates restricting HFSS food among foods among her peers. Welcome, Claudia. And will she speak first? Okay. And the next one is Mr. Adit Shrira. He is from Maharashtra. He is an adolescent. He promotes healthy eating among his friends and peers and tries to influence and educate his peers on healthy eating practices.
Claudia, you go first, please.
Yes. Okay. Good morning. Afternoon, everyone who are present here. So currently, I would like to talk probably most on the overweight and obesity here in India. It has increasing like a huge like it has been such a health concern, mostly especially among the adolescent, and not only the adolescent but also the children. So as you can see, the adolescents have developed behavioral patterns and make lifestyle that can also affect their present health and future, in which they are involved in eating these processed foods, even junk foods, and even these takeout, in which it can lead to overweight, obesity, and undernutrition, and can also affect their growth and development. But instead, they should contribute in more eating of these home cooked meals, which contains all type groups, so that in which they will be able to get more healthy lifestyle. So as you can see, lifestyle also has a huge impact on the adolescent, as such as they lack the lack of exercise, in which they consume a lot of foods such as high calories foods which contain less nutritional value. So it affects a lot to their health. So not only physically but also mentally. So especially during this pandemic of COVID-19, people were almost stuck at home and they don't have anywhere else to go, and they always just consume a lot of food, and they don't release that energy anywhere. So it has contributed a lot, and since there is no physical activity, so it has by consuming these lots of food, it has increased a lot, like a huge percentage in obesity and overweight. So there are some measures which can be taken in which we can maybe reduce overweight and obesity, especially among the adolescents, by making them aware of the importance of healthy foods, especially home cooked meals, which might be contain all the 5 food groups, which can help them to get a healthy eating lifestyle. And also through social media, since teens nowadays are more involved in through Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, they can probably get more knowledge from them, like what are the more healthy eating in which they can contribute and which they can consume daily. So by providing awareness programs and even seminars, not only to the school but also the community, since there are still some parts in India that there are some maybe adolescents after they pass out, maybe from class 8 or class 10, they don't go to school anymore. So since they don't have this knowledge in which they know that which are the unhealthy foods that which can contribute to obesity and overweight, and which can lead to many non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular diseases. So by also showing less advertisements of unhealthy foods, and by reducing the promotion of these unhealthy foods such as these pre-packed foods, which mostly there are some which contains a lot of trans fat, and also by giving more advertisement on these healthy foods and how they are and how they get nutritional value from them, and also by maybe contributing by giving high taxation on the high fat, sugar, salt, and foods, and by limiting the availability of junk food in school premises, since this is where most of the starting from children, they spend more of the time, especially adolescents, in school. So this is where they get a lot of junk food, especially these packet chips, lots of things, especially beverages also. So it can contribute a lot in which it can be harmful for the health, but mostly, especially if they are adults. So maybe by limiting the availability of food in the school premises, and by restricting the availability of high foods, of foods which are high in saturated fat, trans fat, and added sugar or sodium, and by reducing the amounts of fat and sugar salt, especially in food, in these prepacked foods. And also fun of pack nutrition, can contribute a lot in reducing the obesity and overnutrition here, especially since most of the adults, they don't study the label which are at the back of maybe the packet, such as the chips and all. So instead, if we want this front of pack nutrition, if we can show this, if there are some signs and symbols, especially not only for these educated adolescents, but also for the uneducated people, so that in which there are signs, maybe some which can be easily recognized that it is contain high amounts of maybe salt, sugar, and then also fat. So it will help a lot, and it can make consumers it can make consumption of these unhealthy food, and consumers can make informed choices about the food they buy and the product food they use. So maybe not only them, but also maybe parents can contribute a lot, especially if they can educate their children on how these unhealthy foods can contribute a lot to the obesity and overnutrition of the adults.
I have 2 quick questions for you. One thing is, what prompts your age group of people to buy food? Is it the healthfulness of the food, or it's the only taste? What is the biggest nudge according to you? And there are a lot of other things also that relate to status, that relate to many other things. Because you have been advocating for healthy foods with your friends, how difficult is it to convince them?
Maybe
Or how
probably
easy?
sometimes, I guess, if you can give them a lot of more information on how this food are harmful for their health, like it can contribute a lot of for these, especially for these cardiovascular disease, how it can contribute when they are maybe when they are an adult. Maybe right now, if we can like implement some kinds of like especially teachings in school, also if they give some kind of awareness, maybe seminars, it can really help them with that since most of them since it's where the time of period where the since adolescent age is the time where we started to make our own food choices, especially how we live with the lifestyle and all. So I guess it's better if it's also better if we start implementing these starting from childhood age because that is the time where we can educate a child starting from the children to the adolescent.
Okay, thank you. Can we have Adit Sriram to share his views quickly, please?
Hello and good morning, good evening. My name is Adish Shriram and I'm 17 years old. I just passed 12th standard and I'm going to pursue BTech in computer science. My passion is to play cricket, in which exercising and having a healthy diet is very necessary to be fit. I'm the member of an adolescent network convened by PHFI under Let's Fix Our Food initiative. I'm honored to be able to speak in such a good platform. These are my views on front of pack nutrition labeling. First of all, the adolescents nowadays are highly active on social media like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, etc. They should advertise about FOPLs on these platforms to educate the youth about it. The purpose it fulfills, why it is necessary for people, especially the teenagers. In addition to that, they should not neglect the people who are not on social media and who are unable to read. We can use pictorial representation like the veg, non-veg labels and educate all the people by setting campaigns and asking political leaders and actors to promote it. Secondly, they should invest in properly conducting quality checks and make sure companies are labeling the correct values of sugar, sodium, cholesterol level, etc. They also have to make sure the FOPLs are colorful and pleasing to the eye. Every packet in the country, including the candy bar, should have FOPL printed on their packet, preferably in the front. Lastly, they should give the companies the freedom to create their own unique design, but the content should be in standard format. Thank you.
Okay, this is a view that he says that companies, you mean to say the FOPNL should be, the front of pack label should be made by the companies themselves?
No, the design only, the contents and the, yeah.
The design, is it? The design of the FOPNL should be made by the company.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Then I'll get back to this two questions from Dr. Arun Gupta. One is about how about using a symbol like U on ultra processed food packs. So that can be one of the example, so that you know if it is ultra processed food, a U, big U is standing on the pack. Will that be helpful is one of the questions that he asks. Who will take this question? Any of our panelists or?
You can answer, Dr. Subarao.
Okay, I'll go to the next question, ma'am. This is for you and for us. This question is for NIN. Ma'am, are you online? If you're online, the question is, will NIN reach out to Ministry of Health and FSSAI on FOPNL type soon? Is the question. Okay. Yes, I think I can answer this question partly. Yes, soon we'll reach out with our report to all the policy making bodies, scientific institutes, and scientific bodies, and also the ministry very soon. Ministry is concerned very soon. We are going to reach out with them, and we just completed our data collection, and then we are in the process of analyzing it. I hope that answers the question. And yes, can we get back to this question of sir? Is it the nutrients of concern, but that are of interest for front of pack labeling, or is it also the other ingredients that are important to be considered? Dr. Nair and ma'am, if you are online.
Yeah, all ingredients are very important for regulators. That's why I think these are all either mentioned at the back of pack, but it probably difficult to consolidate and put in a holistic, I mean, indication of all these things in one this thing. I mean, it's very difficult. That's why we have warning labels given for certain additives that a certain age group should not take, or I mean, it's all given at the back of pack. And certain, like for example, allergy. I mean, they're all on the front of pack. I mean, wherever it's required as a health emergency, most of the things are captured either in the front of pack or back of pack, in either in a highlighted form, or there is a mention about these aspects in the label. I mean, it depends upon the ingredients. I mean, color, of course, they're all part of the ingredients. It will be mentioned. Preservatives, it will be mentioned. Only thing, they sometimes put only the numbers, so you don't know what exactly is the number represent. So they're all been actually captured in the label. But based on that, whether we can provide a health indication or anything is probably, I mean, one has to think of a holistic computation of all these and give a rank or something, and then indicate that as I mean, a figure, so that based on a standard scale, without preservative or without coloring agents, what rating you can give for a processed food. I mean, this is all I can think of for the time being, Dr. Subbarao. Dr. Subbarao there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
I was actually reading out another question, but with my mic off. There is another student of ours who asked a question: what could be the strategies to address food fashion psychology among adolescents? Can FOPNL be one of the things that can address that? That's a very difficult question. I don't know which of the panelists will take this. Anyone wants to take this question?
I think
yeah, I will answer this question initially. The food as a fashion statement and psychology is indeed a big problem. FOPNL may not be able to directly address it, but FOPNL can also partially address it. Those who consider food as a style statement or something like that, if they know about, if they are serious about the healthfulness or unhealthiness of a particular food, definitely FOPNL will be a tool for them to judge about the quality of the food. If only status or aspirational value or the taste are the only drivers, I think that psychology needs to be addressed through a campaign. Dr. Amit, you want to add anything else? Yes, please.
I think it's a very important question, and it basically directs our attention to the larger marketing issue. And that is where the role of advertisement and marketing of these foods, better control on those, comes into picture. But I'll just give you one example. The school policy, the regulation that junk food will not be available in schools and nearby came a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago. And it said something like that. Ultimately, it said that it will happen based on the categorization of HFSS foods. And that still has to be done by FSSAI. And this entire exercise of trying to identify HFSS foods was actually dependent on this new labeling system, wherein we were trying to figure out, okay, which is high, which is low, and somehow now we are moving on to stars, which is not nutrient specific. The entire HFSS system now goes at the back seat. So that is where I'm saying this move will not only impact the labeling regulation. It will also now go back and impact all the parallel regulations that we have even made or are attempting to make. You go back and see the school regulation, you will say only that this is about HFSS food. So now should we go back and say no, foods with less than 3 stars are bad food? Would we be able to do that? And the same goes to all the regulations, the NCD action plan of the government, which talks about regulating advertisement of HFSS food. So are we again going to go back and say, no, this is about stars, and because HFSS we somehow decided is no longer we can do, we have figured out Health Star. This is exactly what happened many years ago. When we said junk food, we referred to the NIN dietary guidelines, which somewhere mentions unhealthy food in parentheses, junk food have this and this, but till date FSSAI says no, junk food can't be defined. So there's this dietary manual from NIN way back. At least it touches on the processed food and junk food. But then we said no junk food. We said okay, HFSS. Now years down the line, we are saying not even HFSS. We had made parallel regulations of HFSS. So that is why holistically, in a very entirety, we have to address this issue. And we will not be able to address it just by doing this labeling. Herein the role of marketing, not only on TV, broadcasting regulation, but also digital media, the outdoor advertisements, the outdoor media that we see, billboards, stadiums, the advert games, the video games, a lot of digital infrastructure. That marketing needs to be controlled where our children are actually exposed to very much. So
yes, Dr.
Really
I completely agree with it. Actually, we've debated this in the first two e-dialogues. We extended the first dialogue even to the second one to address advertising and marketing, and we brought in a whole lot of stakeholders, and we have about 8 or 10 recommendations from that, which we'll be sharing very soon. Ma'am, since you are back, yeah, Dr. Rupa, I'll come back to you. Dr. Hemlata is back, and then there are two questions, ma'am. One about the labeling of, or how to get into front of pack labeling. The other ingredients like the chemicals or the preservatives or the others that are there, can we at all get it into front of pack labeling is one question. And second question Dr. Arun Gupta asks is, will NIN share its upcoming research outcomes with the ministry and FSSAI soon? These are the two questions. These are for Dr. Hemlata.
Of course, we have planned to share the results. We'll be communicating it to the ministry as well as the FSSAI. A policy paper also will be evolved based on that. And the first question is regarding how the other ingredients should be projected. I think Dr. Nair is the best person for that. And Amit Khurana also would be able to suggest on that. I strongly feel it is all the mass-produced products, all these mass-produced products which have a very long shelf life automatically have all these ingredients. It is very simple. I mean, if you go to street foods or small businesses, you do not find all these ingredients. It is only in the big industries, franchisees, chain restaurants, chain outlets where you find these products. Particularly, I mean, I can give even say a simple examples like KFCs, McDonald's, then Subways. I mean, there are certain research done, and they have shown that these ingredients are very high, not at all at acceptable level. And these are just small examples. But then there are many other food industry, other food products like, say, for example, peanut butter, then all the vegetable milk extracts, even your own vegetable oil extracts have all these ingredients. I mean, of course, we use them in smaller quantities when we cook them at home. So I don't know what kind of label would help. Dr. Nair is the best person to suggest.
He already gave his point. We were asking for you, but I think you had a visitor. Yeah, Dr. Rupa, you have anything to add? This is the last.
Yeah, I just want to add to the previous discussion, Dr. Subbarao, about the food being a fashion. And I think we need to get a clarity on what FOPN can do as standalone, and what it can do with additional policies. What FOPNL can do standalone is a lot of the food are considered potentially healthy by the general people. That is the first thing FOPNL can do to warn people they are not. Like, for example, many people consider biscuits as healthy, fruit juices, and breakfast cereals, so yogurt, and many other packaged food which are potentially considered healthy but are high in sugar, salt, and very many things. And that's the key thing the FOPNet will do, where people are going looking out for a healthy product, whether they can differentiate between what is healthy and what is not healthy. It cannot help people when they're going to just get a cake or want to buy a tasty and nice food to eat. That's not going to help. For that is the additional policies what Mr. Amit Khurana was discussing about marketing to the children and adolescent, and having restriction on sales, etc., would be helping. Second thing, I just wanted to make a comment on what the adolescent young guys, I was really happy to listen to them and talking about it, but just making one simple comment about having colorful warning labels. The research has been proven that it shouldn't be colorful because always the packages are already colorful. The warning has to be in a very unattractive manner so that it should not attract people to buy it. In fact, it should deter people from buying the products which are high in the harmful ingredients. That's all from me.
Thank you very much. We're completely running out.
One thing,
Yes, ma'am.
Apart from advertisements, regulations on advertisements, regulations on front of pack labeling, we need to think about subsidies also. There's huge subsidies on given to food industry. I mean, 70% of the product that are produced by food industries are coming within the bracket of almost 2 or just 5%. Only some 18 or 12% come under that big bracket of 18%, 12%. So subsidies also can be regulated in such a way, can be done in such a way that it promotes healthy food productions.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think that is an idea with which we are living and making a right segue into our next topic, taxations and subsidies. Taxation of unhealthy foods and subsidies for healthy foods will be our next topic of e-debate, e-dialogue very soon. Thank you very much for that, closing remark, which actually made a right segue into our next e-dialogue. Thank you very much. As usual, we had a very stellar panel and very interesting discussion. And then our speakers, both from within the country and outside, had given an overview of all the FOPNL attempts that have been made elsewhere in the world, giving us pretty much clarity. And also the adolescents have put forth their views. There were many questions, and most of the panelists have answered the questions online in the Q&A box itself, and some we could take here. As usual, we go back with 5 key takeaways. For me, the 5 key takeaways from this is, it is pretty urgent in this country, in the context of growing overweight and obesity, to bring in FOPNL immediately. That's number 1. Number 2, FOPNL, when it comes, there is an overweighing, understanding from around the country, and there is a lot of research done to show warning symbols are working much better, and that needs to be considered with whatever is coming up. Number 3 is adolescents are a key and important group of consumers. They have been missed out in many studies across the globe. And fortunately for us, in an NIN study, we've included them. We'll come back with those results very soon. Nevertheless, these are very important group. Any FOPNL that is introduced should combine with mass education campaign, and the adolescents have given very key points in this debate, that don't confine it to only school curricula, because there are a lot of Indian adolescents who drop out from schools midway, or who drop out right after schools. To keep this going, many more efforts have to be done to educate, both to create nutrition literacy and also to create awareness about how to use the front of pack label and the back of pack label nutrition information to make a food choice. This is an important takeaway from the discussion of the adolescents, and they suggested that the 5th and most important point is also make use of social media. As the previous 2 e-dialogues have told us, that social media could be one of the platforms that can be misused by the manufacturers, advertisers, and food industry to target the adolescents. The adolescents say that it could be used positively to talk about healthy foods, traditional foods, healthy diets, and also the usage of front of pack labeling as a continuous effort to promote healthy consumption and discouraging consumption of unhealthy foods for preventing the growing non-communicable diseases among adolescents. These are my 5 key takeaways, and thank you very much for all the active participation that each of you has given today, and thanks a lot for all the attendees, both on YouTube as well as on Zoom. Thank you very much. And as last responsibility, I would like to thank everyone who's involved in doing this, all the partner agencies of Let's Fix Our Food Consortium, and many thanks to our director for being constant support and also guidance for Let's Fix Our Food agenda and also for Let's Fix Our Food initiative. And thanks also to our beautiful team, 3 young ladies who have anchored the entire show today, Reshma, Paramita, and Kiranmai. Thank you very much, and thank each of the panelists for agreeing. There were a lot of cancellations, lot of last moment changes in the panelists. So the communication was almost near the date this time. And so we had little participation, but the participation was very active participation. We are very happy with it. Thank you very much. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naik. Thank you, Amit. Thank you. Thank you, Subbarao.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the very best. Take care.
Thank you all.